Hello and welcome back to the TCM YouTube channel for the seventh of our season previews for the 8 Women's Regional side. It is the turn of Southern Vipers, and joining us today is Melissa Story. First of all, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm fresh off the back of a holiday. I've got the rest of the cricket season to look forward to, so feeling pretty good about life now. Sun's out, what's not to love?
Absolutely, we'll just ignore the rain that's coming at the end of the week anyway. Let's
Yeah,
let's start by taking a look back at last summer for the Vipers. Another summer with silverware, but then runners up in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint. What did you make of it overall?
yeah, I thought it was a really promising season where a lot of, I guess, the Vipers are always that side with a target on their back because they've traditionally performed so well, getting the Rachel Hare Flint titles in 2020 and 2021, and they're a very tough side to beat. So there's always a bit of pressure on them, but I think they responded really well to that. And you had brilliant kind of standouts in the batting department. I'm very biased, but Emily Windsor was absolutely fantastic last summer. She scored 288 runs in the Rachel Hare Flint alone, and I remember a fantastic partnership between herself and Georgia Elwes at Hove, which just stood out for me as just, the Vipers had a shaky start, but even if the top order failed, that middle order come at you hard. And that's one thing I think they discovered about themselves last year. I think another positive thing was, and not something you see so often, is flexibility from the captain. Georgia Adams at points opened the batting, and then towards the end of the season started putting herself in at 5, which I found really interesting. It was because she admitted herself, I'm a really good player of spin, and actually I can come make a real big impact later on in the innings. So I thought that was a really interesting thing from last season. And when we were stood at the awards ceremony, it was a joint Hampshire and Vipers award ceremony. We had 2 trophies in front of us, and we were kind of going, there could have been 5 at one point across the 2 teams, and certainly I think the Vipers would have been disappointed with the way the Rachel Hare Flint final went. They were in a dominant position against the Diamonds, and things just slipped away from them, and the Diamonds did well to put a comprehensive total on the board in the end. But I think when you have the coach of Charlotte Edwards, you're going to be out to win everything. So they only got 1 trophy last season. They're going to have their eyes set on both this year.
Definitely, and you mentioned there about how everyone played their role and contributed. This was especially so in that batting department. You mentioned the Rachel Hare Flint. You mentioned Emily Windsor, but Georgia Elwes and Georgia Adams both over 200 runs each. And then one of the departees, Paige Schofield, and then Chloe Hill were dependables as well. How, compared to other regional sides that we've spoken about on the channel so far, how important is it to have a whole batting unit that digs in and contributes at times?
I think really important, because I think traditionally you've seen maybe some of the weaker teams in the competition. I think Sunrisers have struggled with this, and historically Thunder, although I think Thunder's luck is actually going to change quite a lot this season. They've done some really good recruitment, and they invest in their homegrown talent brilliantly. But previously, before, you've seen teams who lose those early wickets, you almost just get the sense that they're like, oh well, our top 3 didn't deliver. That's it. We're going to get bowled out for 120 and call it a day. Let's get back on the bus. But the Vipers have faith in their batting all the way down to 11 or maybe 10, because you know what, I'm going to back Lauren Bell here. I'm going to say 11. And obviously last year they had Carla Rudd, who's been a fantastic a player of the game, who's retired at the end of last season. She was batting at 10, so they had really, really good batting depth. And now they've recruited in 2 young wicket keepers, as you mentioned, Chloe Hill, and then Brianna Southby's moved to the Vipers from the Stars, and that's going to just strengthen their batting department even more, because at points you did get the sense that Carla Rudd, she was put down at 10 because she maybe had a more traditional style of batting. She was one of the more senior players, while Southby and Hill, they're prepared to give it a whack. So they certainly strengthen things a lot better. And they're a team jam-packed full of all-rounders, even though they have lost Schofield and Norris, I consider probably an all-rounder as well. Those will be big blows. I'm sure we'll go on to talk about that. But certainly their batting depth and their flexibility is going to be so important for them for the first half of the Rachel Hare Flint Cup, and then for the entire duration of the Charlotte Edwards Cup, when they've got their full range of England players available, especially.
Definitely, we can move seamlessly on to the departures of Norris and Schofield there. 23 wickets between them in the Rachel Hero Flint and the aforementioned batting ability. You spoke before we started recording about how they're going to look to find that balance to the side they had last summer. How difficult of a task is it replacing those two, despite the players they have brought in over the winter?
I think it's changed the balance of the team. I mean, not only have you lost two incredibly talented players, I mean, Tara Norris was the third highest wicket taker in the Richmond Hill Flint. She had 12. Um, she's moved to the Thunder, and actually she's had a brilliant winter because she's picked up experience in the Women's Premier League. You know, the only associate player to play in that, picked up a fiver. Absolutely insane how her kind of profile has just completely exploded. And then with Schofield, you know, she was the second highest wicket taker for the Vipers in the Rachel Hay Flint Cup. So they are big losses. I think if you look at how they can fill that balance, it may be less of an issue when they have their England players available because they'll still have the seam options of Bell, who's going to play a massive role this season. Shrubsole, you imagine as well, is going to be operating with Bell, two vicious in-swing bowlers. I feel incredibly sorry for any batters coming against that. And then Georgia Elvis as well as a seam option. Freya Kemp as well, who's been out all winter because of injury. I'm not too sure what her kind of status is at the moment, but if she's fully fit for the start of the season, you'd imagine those would be your four seamers. It's more going to be a question of, you know, what's going to happen when maybe Bell isn't available, when maybe Kemp isn't available, and you look at the available options. Alice Monaghan was just given a winter contract only just last week. She's been in around the Hampshire and Vipers setup for a good while now. She's also played in the hundreds and only really kind of played as a specialist fielder at times, but she bowls incredibly quick. She's got one of my favourite bowling actions around the game, really powerful front arm. She also gives it a whack with the bat as well, and as I mentioned, a fantastic fielder. So I'm looking for her to get a go this season for the Vipers. I'd really like to see that change up in the structure of their team because I guess if there was one criticism of it is they don't have that express pace bowler. The other options to fill maybe a Tara Norris gap or another seam gap. You've got Sophie Mitchell-Moore is in the Vipers squad as well. She's coming back off the back of 2-3 years of injury, but she's been working closely with Anya Shrubsole as well as the Hampshire men's bowling coach. And again, really quick, feisty bowler. And then in the Vipers Academy, you've got a really talented young bowler, Mary Taylor, who was selected as a non-travelling reserve for the Under-19 World Cup. And then she gets a lovely swing on the ball. You'll often see her just clip the top of that off stump. And even though that they will, you know, suffer from the loss of Schofield and Norris, I think, one, it goes to show just how competitive this Vipers squad is to get into. But when those England players depart, I'm guessing one of those three, or even a couple of those three, are going to really be scrapping for those positions in the team. And that's exciting. It's good to see this competition between those players on the bench.
Definitely, you mentioned throughout there the England stars moving on to the Shire Evans Cup where they won it obviously last year. Danny Wyatt, 221 runs at an average just under 40 and a strike rate over 150. I mean, she's gone on to new ground over the winter with England and different franchises, but how impressive has she been in recent times for the Vipers?
She's been fantastic, and I can't begin to imagine the kind of wisdom she's imparting on the younger players like Ella McCacken, how she's been able to help Maya Bouchier, who's been another one of those players who's jumped up and down the order. Bouchier, actually a player who I don't think has been utilised actually correctly by England more recently in T20. She's coming in at 7. She's not really a big hitter, but she builds an innings like anyone else. So, you know, I think Danny White could have a really good influence there to Bouchier to try and set her up for almost filling one of those gaps, which will open up once Danny White retires. Not that I like to think of the day because, you know, she was one of the original women's players. So many players now, you know, are stronger. There's better timing. They have more access to training, so we're seeing more sixes. But Danny White was hitting sixes, you know, decades ago, and I think I actually played my first ever full senior county game against Danny Wyatt, and she absolutely tore us apart. You know, she's a brilliant character, lots of laughs around there, brilliant in the field, but she'll get you off to a good start, almost in a Chris Gale way. And sometimes it won't work, sometimes it will fail, and she'll go cheaply, but she won't use up many deliveries in the process. So if she can go out there in the Charlotte Edwards Cup, and it's just going to be invaluable to have those England players in that, those 3 weeks of the competition. We've already seen the Sunrisers sign Donovan Meerkirk. And actually, I think we need to keep an eye out for other franchises prioritising the Charlotte Edwards Cup and saying, okay, we're going to use the Rachel Harris thing to have a bit of a development. Let's try and finish mid-table. But if we've got our England players available, for example, the Blaze will have quite a few England players available. I reckon they're going to be going hard at the back of the Southern Vipers, and Danny White's going to want to perform, get her team into a good place so that they can keep Lottie at the Ageas Bowl, because as the main slogan last year is they've got to win Lottie back, and they did. So yeah, Danny White, absolutely brilliant, and I guess for her as well, it's just making sure that she keeps performing. It's disappointing to not see her in the Women's Premier League, for whichever reason she wasn't picked up, and she's such a huge fan of the competition. She obviously got to play in exhibition matches in Pakistan and did really well there. So fingers crossed for Vipers fans, and from a Vipers perspective, she can bring that good form to the start of the competition on Saturday.
Definitely touch on one more England star before we look forward more to this summer. Charlie Dean, 12 wickets in the Charlotte Edwards Cup last season, and then just yesterday for Hampshire reached a milestone over 1,000 runs, one of only a few women to do so for the county. How important is her all-round ability going to be, especially with the aforementioned all-rounders in Tara Norris and Paige Schofield we've mentioned leaving, and does that role of hers grow in importance now?
It will definitely grow, and I think we've slowly seen her being given more and more responsibility. I remember speaking to her when I started my commentary 2 years ago, and she would take quite a big blow if she'd bowled badly in a game. She cares so much, and she'd be like, my bowling is just being awful, it's being awful. But, she was awarded a captaincy in the 100. That can only grow your confidence as a player so young. She's obviously been thrown into controversy as well, which gets you a bit more limelight, whether it's good or bad publicity. But, she's matured and developed so much. She's now gone overseas with England, and I think not only will she have at the back of her mind, how much competition there is in this England squad with Eccleston and Glenn. Is there a spot for a third spinner there? If she has a fantastic performance with the ball, then I'm pretty sure she'll be in that Ashes squad anyway. But whether she'll be in that playing 11, I think will depend on a lot of her early performances. And then also, as you mentioned, passing 1,000 runs with the bat for Hampshire. I think this start of the season is going to be quite important for her with the bat, because we potentially haven't seen what she is capable of doing at an England level. And yes, she's batting down the order more. She's been in some pretty hopeless situations sometimes where there's not much she could do, but she's such a talented batter, and has all the innovative shots. So I would like to see her playing some more, integral innings for the Vipers in that middle order. And this has the potential to be such a big season for her, and she will probably have a lot of fun actually bowling alongside Lindsay Smith, who of course is another recruit for the Vipers. And you've got two incredibly talented spinners. The Ageas Bowl does spin sometimes randomly. It just comes out of nowhere. I'm sure Liam Dawson will be able to say that you're bowling 5 in a row, nothing happens, then suddenly one's bouncing past the keeper's head. But yeah, they're going to play a massive role, and I'm sure alongside Charlotte Taylor as well, another off spinner, that those three will be quite vicious for opposition batters. And of course Georgia Adams, who's crafty low arm off spin has been developing quite a lot over these last few years, which is nice to see.
For sure. You mentioned Lindsay Smith there. The other incomings, obviously, we've already spoken about them, but Chloe Hill, Rihanna Selfie, and Anya Shrubs also player coach. But going back to Lindsay Smith, you've briefly spoken about her then, but effectively stealing her back from the Northern Diamonds in a way. How, in a sense, the competition between the two sides have been in all the finals for the Rachel Hay Flint, just those two teams. How important is that? Just take one of your direct rivals' best players.
I think it's great. I mean, first of all, look at it from a personal perspective for Lindsay Smith, because she's going to be going, well, I just won the trophy last year, and now I'm going to try and help the other team win it. And suddenly she's got 2 prize medals and, a lot more success than both teams combined. But I think it's good that she's returning, to her home locality. A massive signing for the Vipers. I mean, she did brilliantly in last year's Rachel Hay Flint trophy, for example, 13 wickets. She's a crafty bowler, quite unsuspecting, and one who had her shot playing for England actually quite early on in her career. And I am probably an advocate to be giving her another opportunity. Of course, it's so hard to get through the England selection process now because there's just so much talent. But often they say with spinners that you develop your skills as you get older, and I think she's shown that these last few years for the Diamonds, just how much she thinks about the game. And you hear a lot from others, and I remember Georgia Elwes saying she's a feisty character on the pitch, and you maybe wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of her, even though she looks like an absolute sweetheart, and she is an absolute sweetheart. But she knows a lot of the Vipers girls personally. I'm sure she'll settle right back into being at the Ageas Bowl and in that setup, and also maybe be able to help some of the younger spinners coming through as well with Finty Trussler, for example, who's also in the squad. And even though they're bowling a slightly different variation of spin, it goes to show just how many options they've got with 3 off spinners, 1 left arm spinners, and 2 leg spinners waiting in the ranks. It's really quite the luxury for the Vipers. But yeah, Lindsay Smith, I reckon, is going to be in the wickets early this season for sure.
May well just be the case. We'll move on to more general discussion about the contracts ECB have rolled out. There's many ones involved for the Vipers. Obviously, you've got Lauren Bell, Danny Wyatt, Charlie and Freya Kemp as your centrally contracted players. And then on the ECB ones, you've got Georgia Adams, Maya Bouchier, Anya Shrubsole, Georgia Elwes, Ella McCucken, how do you say it? Emily Windsor, Lindsay Smith, and then the 6-month deals announced recently in Charlotte Taylor, Nancy Harmon, Alice Monaghan, Chloe Hill, and Rihanna Southby. I've asked most other people this, but how good is it to see the ECB investing this money into the women's game?
But just brilliant. It's something people have been fighting for so long, and even in the kind of 4 years when I've been out of that setup, even when I was in the Vipers Academy, I was never imagining. I desperately wanted to play at the next level up. I never thought I'd be paid for it, let alone being paid to train and just go to the gym. It's a dream job really, and so brilliant for the likes of Charlotte Taylor, for example, who I know personally, that she can now focus fully on cricket and doesn't have to keep working this part-time job and managing these 2 lives where you're working 9 to 5 and then rushing off to the Ageas, having to gym and train till 9 p.m. and then do it all over again the next day. So we're going to see more leveling up. We're going to see the standards get driven up so much, and there's going to be even more competition for spaces. There's probably going to be some surprise players who start making themselves known across the season, and because there is so many contracts available now, people are going to be really determined to get some good early performances in. But for any young girls who go along to the games now and are watching, that they can see players getting paid for being professional athletes, it's just absolutely the best result. And the only thing I'd hope for is just that at some point you can keep up with Australia. I know that's going to be difficult because they've just recently as well announced a massive pay rise for their domestic players. But as well other countries around the world, because it's great to see India, Australia, and England, getting more professional. But what about those teams getting left behind? We need to make sure that there's almost this reciprocal relationship where maybe the bigger countries are supporting the smaller countries to make sure they also have more of a professional setup, so that we have better competitions, better bilateral series, and there's just a bit more entertainment there. But obviously for now, ECB prioritising on just catching up with Australia, particularly ahead of this summer, which is going to be hugely exciting.
Definitely, we do need those Ashes back as well. So that'd be one thing on the agenda for this summer. But in terms of predictions now, for a bit of fun with the Vipers, we'll start with the Rachel Heo Flint. Can they go one better this year?
I think they can. I do think they can. I think they had a bit of a scare last season. I don't want to say complacent, but I think they were, assuming that title, that the trophy had their names on again. But they've strengthened their ranks, and if they've got all their England players available, then they'll certainly be making a push for that trophy again now.
Nice. And then with the Charlotte Edwards Cup, obviously defending champions, similar result this year?
I think that the Charlotte Edwards Cup is so much more in the air. The unpredictability of T20 cricket with all these other domestic franchises, coming at the Vipers hard. I'm not sure I can make the call with as much confidence. I'd certainly put more on the Vipers dominating the Rachel Hare Flint, getting to the final in that competition. But, we've seen before that the Sparks have put up some good competition, so have the Stars in the T20 format. And as I mentioned, I think the Thunder have got a real good shot this year as well. So, and the Blaze, there's so many teams. I think I've maybe put to the back more the Sunrisers and Storm. Unfortunately, I maybe don't think they've got that depth. But in terms of the other 6 teams, I think it's anyone's trophy in the Charlotte Edwards Cup. Although, of course, I'd like the Vipers to win.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Melissa, for joining us. That concludes the Southern Vipers preview for this summer. And thank you, everyone, for watching. There'll be still one more preview to come for the Northern Diamonds in the coming days before the season starts on Saturday. Thank you for watching.